He always looks like he's about to explode. Someone whispered just loud enough for it to land where they wanted it to, right next to Malik. It wasn't the first time he'd heard it. Wouldn't be the last. The label followed him into every boardroom, clung to the air during every presentation. The angry black man. Not the man who just saved the firm a six-figure lawsuit. Not the Harvard law graduate. Not even just Malik. It was always too passionate, too intense, or too aggressive, but he didn't flinch, not even a blink. He just clicked his pen, scribbled a note in the margin of his legal pad, and nodded at the client across the table like nothing had been said. Malik Thompson was a senior associate at Everman and Holt, one of the top corporate law firms in the city. At 34, he was already the most requested litigation strategist in the building. Clients liked results, and Malik delivered, but results didn't erase the way his colleagues reacted when he raised his voice a decibel too high or asked a tough question too directly. In meetings, if he asserted a point, just like everyone else, it was hostile. When he remained silent, they said he was brooding. It wasn't that Malik didn't know how to play the game. He just didn't see why he should have to shrink himself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. He dressed sharp, pressed suits, silk ties, polished shoes, but that never shielded him from the subtle digs. He was articulate, respectful, and driven, but still, they looked at him like he might bite, and when he calmly called out someone's flawed analysis with facts and logic. The discomfort around the table was almost physical. On that particular Tuesday morning, the meeting was with Sotera Tech, a billion-dollar biotech company. Their CFO was in hot water over a sketchy off-books investment. Malik had poured over 200 pages of financial disclosures, staying late 2 nights in a row to prepare a rock-solid defense. He didn't expect thanks, but he didn't expect what came instead either. The moment he walked into the conference room, tension rippled across the air. Rachel, a junior associate, was already seated and greeted him with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jared, another senior attorney, exchanged a glance with the VP of Client Relations and muttered, "Let's hope things stay calm today." Malik heard it, so did the client's team. And yet, no one addressed it. As the meeting kicked off, Malik presented the risk mitigation plan he'd crafted with precision. No emotion, just numbers, strategy, outcomes. But the moment he finished, one of the client's reps leaned back and smirked. "Well, I appreciate that enthusiasm. But maybe we go with a less confrontational tone when we draft the statement." Malik blinked. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't used a single emotionally charged word. But there it was again, that same coded language. The room paused, waiting to see if Malik would fire back. Instead, he simply nodded and said, "Noted, I'll make the tone adjustments myself by end of day." Then he turned the page and moved to the next agenda item like it never happened. But he felt it, that sting, that quiet frustration, the one that whispered, "No matter what you do, they'll still only see what they want to see." Still, Malik didn't let it break his stride. He stayed focused, let his work speak, let his silence sharpen. What no one in that room knew, not Jared, not Rachel, not even the smoking client, was that earlier that morning, Malik had been in a private breakfast meeting with the firm's founder and CEO, Charles Everman. The two had met at 6:45 a.m. sharp, at a small corner booth in a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the firm. Everman had requested the meeting personally. No assistant, no calendar ping, just a handwritten note slipped into Malik's office the night before. "Let's talk. You've been on my mind lately." Over coffee and eggs, Charles had asked Malik one question: "If I handed you a partner title tomorrow, what would you do differently?" Malik had looked the CEO in the eye and answered, "Nothing. That's the point." Everman had just nodded, sipped his coffee, and said, "Good." But back in that conference room, no one knew, not yet. To them, Malik was still the intense one, the one they tiptoed around, the one they joked about inside texts and whispered about in the elevator. He didn't correct them, not yet, because the time was coming. And when it did, the silence he kept would speak louder than anything he'd ever said. The day the announcement was made, nobody saw it coming, except Malik. It was the quarterly firm-wide meeting, held in the grand glass-paneled conference center on the 21st floor. The partners sat in the front, their nameplates shining like brass medals on a battlefield. Everyone else, associates, paralegals, interns, assistants, scattered themselves by rank. It was unspoken but clear. Power had seating preferences. Malik took a seat halfway back, beside Jamal, one of the junior legal researchers who had joined the firm 2 months earlier. It wasn't a statement, it was comfort. Malik never needed a front row seat to know what he brought to the table. Besides, he'd rather sit next to the quiet kid in the cheap tie who reminded him of himself 10 years ago than next to a partner who still asked if he played basketball. The meeting followed its usual rhythm: numbers, projections, updates, until Charles Everman stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "Before we wrap, I want to share a promotion that reflects not just performance, but values." The room hushed. People leaned forward. There was an energy, a charge, that rippled across the room like static before a storm. "We talk a lot about excellence here," Everman continued, "but excellence isn't just in results. It's in how we treat people, how we lead when no one's watching, how we keep integrity under pressure. Today, I want to welcome a new partner who embodies all of that." There was a pause, long enough for the room to collectively inhale. Malik Thompson. Silence, for a full 3 seconds. Not a single hand clapped, not because they didn't know who he was, but because they didn't believe what they just heard. Rachel blinked like her contact lens had betrayed her. Jared slowly turned in his seat, confusion fighting with disbelief. In the row ahead, someone whispered, "Wait, he's not even, wasn't he just a senior associate?" Then, like dominoes falling, the claps started, hesitant at first, then growing, then rising to a full round of applause. But Malik noticed. He noticed who stood up first and who looked like they'd swallowed lemons. He noticed the frozen smiles, the congratulatory shoulder pats that came a bead too late to be sincere. Still, he stood, walked calmly to the front, took the handshake from Everman, gave a small, humble nod, no speech, no grand reaction, just the same poise he'd carried in every room they said he didn't belong in. Afterward, as people gathered around the refreshment table and fake smiles returned to familiar faces, Malik made his way toward the elevators. He didn't like crowds, never had. That's when Jared caught up with him. "Hey, congratulations, man, didn't see that coming." Malik smiled. "You never do." Jared chuckled nervously. So, how long had that been in the works?" Malik tapped the elevator button, keeping his tone even. "Let's just say, some conversations happen outside this building." Jared nodded slowly, trying to find a footing in the shifting ground. "Listen, man, I hope you know, anything I said before, it was all in good humor. You know." Malik turned to him, not unkindly. "It usually is, until it isn't." Jared opened his mouth, closed it, then backed off with a muttered, "Right, got it." The elevator doors opened. Malik stepped inside. As they closed, he exhaled for the first time that morning. Later that week, the news hit the firm's internal portal: Malik Thompson, partner, corporate litigation division. Alongside it was a list of his accomplishments: 10 high-profile wins, 3 community-led pro bono initiatives, an internal leadership mentoring program for first-gen law students, and a published law journal article that had quietly been cited in a Supreme Court amicus brief. Turns out, he wasn't just a good lawyer. He was exceptional, but none of that had stopped the label. Angry, confrontational, too intense. Not until the title change. Now people wanted to hear his passionate perspective. Now his commanding presence was an asset. Funny how quickly perception shifts when power walks into the room. Still, Malik didn't forget. He didn't forget the years of being side-eyed, silenced, or subtly undermined. But he also didn't carry bitterness. He carried something far heavier and more sacred: responsibility. Because now, every quiet black associate watching from the wings had someone to point to. Someone who didn't bend, someone who didn't bleach himself to fit in, someone who was called angry until he was called partner. The Monday after the announcement, Malik stepped into the office just like he always had, early. Calm, no fanfare, but everything around him had changed. The same receptionist who used to barely lift her eyes from her keyboard now greeted him with a practiced smile. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson." not Malik, not, "Hey there, Mr. Thompson," like the suit he'd always worn had finally been recognized as real. Like his presence now held weight, it wasn't lost on him. At the morning strategy huddle, a junior partner tried to finish Malik's thought, something that had happened dozens of times before, but this time, Everman stepped in, let him speak, the senior partner said firmly. He was midpoint. Malik glanced over. Everman didn't even look up. He just sipped his coffee, as if the correction was no big deal. But it was, because for the first time in his career, Malik wasn't being filtered, he wasn't being softened, he wasn't being translated for comfort. His voice, sharp and clear, was allowed to ring out exactly as it came. And they listened. Still, the change brought a new kind of silence. Some colleagues avoided eye contact, as if unsure how to navigate his presence now that he had a title they respected but never expected him to hold. Others offered hollow praise, quick handshakes, and brisk congratulations in the hallway before retreating into whispering huddles like high school cliques around lockers. But Malik didn't need their validation. He had Jamal, the intern from 2 months ago. Still nervous, still absorbing everything like a sponge. That week, Malik invited him to shadow more meetings, to review his cases, and even to join the firm's diversity committee. Jamal's eyes widened like he'd been handed the keys to a vault he thought was locked for life. "You really mean it?" Jamal asked one afternoon, holding a legal brief Malik had annotated for him. "Of course I do," Malik replied, pausing at his office door. "You think I got here just to be the only one in the room?" Jamal blinked. "Most people in your position, they don't look back." Malik smiled, slow and quiet. "Then I'm not most people." Still, not everyone was thrilled, especially Richard Lane, a partner since the 90s and a man whose idea of diversity was choosing between cream or no cream in his coffee. Richard had been one of the loudest skeptics behind closed doors when Malik's promotion was proposed. And now, as Malik's ideas gained traction, Richard made sure his disdain was felt in passive-aggressive emails, strategic exclusions from golf outings, and questions like, "Are we sure this is the right messaging for our clients?" When Malik pushed for community engagement programs in underrepresented neighborhoods. One afternoon, during a quarterly planning session, Malik laid out a proposal for expanding the firm's reach through strategic pro bono clinics in Black and brown communities, places often neglected by high-powered firms like theirs. The room was quiet after he spoke. Then Richard cleared his throat. "Interesting idea, Malik, but do you think our clients will see this as professional or political?" Malik met his gaze, steady, calm, controlled. "I think our clients will see that we have the courage to lead where others avoid. And that we're not afraid to do good while doing well." A few nodded, a few looked down. Richard leaned back in his chair, lips pressed tight. Malik didn't raise his voice, didn't shift in his seat. He'd long mastered the art of holding fire without setting the room ablaze. After the meeting, several younger associates approached him, quietly. "That was powerful," one said. "I've never seen someone challenge Richard like that without losing their cool." Another added, "I didn't even know we could suggest programs like that." Malik just nodded. "You can, and you should." He knew what they were really saying. "We needed to see that. We needed to see you not shrink." That week, Malik got a message from Auer. They wanted him to be the keynote speaker for the firm's upcoming Diversity and Inclusion Summit. Normally, that kind of ask was code for tokenism. A nice, polished speech from the one black person in leadership, nodding politely at vague terms like belonging and equity without rocking the boat. But Malik had no interest in appeasing. When he took the stage that Friday, the room was full. Partners, associates, admin staff, even clients. The firm had promoted it heavily. The new voice of the firm. He looked out at them, took a breath, and said, "I've been in this building for 10 years. And for most of that time, I've been talked over, second-guessed, and labeled something I never claimed. The angry black man. Not because I yelled, but because I spoke with conviction. Because I didn't laugh at jokes I didn't find funny. Because I asked hard questions and didn't wrap them in soft language." But let me be clear. What some called anger was simply clarity. And what they feared was not rage, but presence. Silence. Then, a rising applause. Not polite, not forced, but real. Malik looked down briefly. In the second row, Jamal stood clapping first. Behind him, Everman, and then, one by one, the rest of the room followed. That day, Malik didn't just share his voice. He shattered a ceiling, not just for himself, but for every person who'd ever been told they were too much simply for being fully themselves. In the weeks following his keynote speech, Malik's words traveled far beyond the firm's walls. Clips from his address circulated online after a young associate posted it to her LinkedIn. Within days, the video gained thousands of views. Comments poured in from law students, corporate professionals, and everyday people who had never set foot in a law firm but had felt the sting of being misjudged for simply showing up in their full, unapologetic selves. One message stood out. A young woman from Chicago wrote, "I used to think I had to dim my light to be accepted in law. After watching your speech, I know I can be both brilliant and bold." Malik read that message in the quiet of his office, the glow of the city lights casting long shadows behind him. He closed his eyes for a moment, remembering a younger version of himself sitting in a classroom, questioning if he'd ever belong in these polished buildings with leather-bound books and glass-walled conference rooms. He smiled. Maybe that version of me finally got his answer. But progress never comes without friction. At the next leadership retreat, Malik proposed restructuring the mentorship pipeline to be more inclusive, suggesting that junior associates from underrepresented backgrounds be matched with partners, real access. Not just optics. The room tensed. Richard was the first to speak. "I worry we're straying from merit here. We've always believed in earning your way, not handing out favors." Malik didn't flinch. Merit doesn't live in a vacuum. You can't measure someone's climb if you ignore the weight they were carrying on the way up. The CEO, a thoughtful man named Daniel Harbour, leaned forward. "I think Malik's point is long overdue." And with that, the initiative passed. The tone of meetings began to shift. Conversations once dominated by a few now invited more voices. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments where Malik caught sideways glances or felt the invisible walls of long-held bias. But something undeniable had begun, a shift in culture, not just policy. One afternoon, Malik sat with Jamal in the firm's cafe, going over a brief. Their table was cluttered with notes, highlighters, and empty coffee cups. "Do you ever get tired?" Jamal asked, "of always having to prove it again, even after you've already done the work?" Malik paused. "Every day, but then I remember, I'm not just proving it for me. I'm making room for the ones who come after." Jamal nodded slowly, as if the truth of that settled deep into his chest. Then, in an unexpected twist, Malik received a call from a university dean. They wanted to honor him at their annual alumni gala, not just for his career success, but for his advocacy and leadership. The dean said, "You've become more than a lawyer. You've become a symbol of what's possible." Malik hesitated. He never liked the spotlight, never chased it, but he also knew what that visibility meant for those watching. At the event, dressed in a sleek midnight blue suit, Malik walked onto the stage with the same quiet dignity he carried into every boardroom. Cameras flashed, the crowd rose in a standing ovation, and as he accepted the award, he looked out across the auditorium and said, "When I started, I was told to tone it down, to speak softer, smile more, and shrink if I wanted to rise. But I've learned that growth doesn't require shrinking. That strength doesn't mean loudness, but it does mean standing firm when the room wants you to bend." He stepped off the stage to handshakes and heartfelt embraces. But one moment hit hardest. A father approached him, holding his teenage son by the shoulder. "My boy's been struggling," the man said. "School, fitting in, feeling seen. We watched your speech together last month," he said. "If he can make it being himself, maybe I don't have to pretend either. You gave my son hope." Malik knelt slightly to meet the boy's eyes. "You don't ever have to pretend to be small. The world needs your full voice." Back at the firm, the senior partners officially ratified Malik's seat on the executive committee. A title, sure, but more than that, a platform. A place where decisions were made, where policies began, where cultures were shaped. And one day, as he passed the glass doors of a conference room, he saw something that stopped him. Jamal, once the quiet intern, was standing, leading a meeting, confident, prepared, Unapologetic, Malik lingered at the door for just a second, smiling to himself, then kept walking. The ripple was working. In time, the firm's website updated their leadership page. Alongside bios filled with Ivy League degrees and accolades was Malik's senior partner, equity strategist, mentor, and under his photo, a quote, "When your presence is questioned, let your work be undeniable." Because in the end, Malik didn't just claim a seat at the table. He helped rebuild the table entirely, stronger, longer, and wide enough for voices long ignored. Months had passed since Malik's promotion to partner, yet the echoes of change he had stirred continued to resonate deeper than he anticipated. Though he had always valued his role as a legal strategist, what moved him most now was the role he played in shifting hearts, in making space for others to bring their full selves into rooms where they were once only tolerated. On a brisk Thursday morning, the firm hosted a regional diversity summit. It was Malik's idea, not just another seminar with buzzwords and cold pastries, but a space where truth could be spoken plainly, without fear of retribution or having to code switch to make it palatable. The panel included partners, young associates, clients, and even community organizers. Malik sat near the edge of the stage, his notepad open, not to speak, but to listen. That was his quiet strength, not the need to be heard, but the need to understand. During the session, a junior associate named Clara, Latina, first-generation college graduate, and barely a year into her legal career, stood up with trembling hands. "Sometimes," she said, voice cracking, "I wondered if I'm here because someone believed in me, or because someone needed to fill a quota." The room fell painfully still. Then, Malik looked up and responded, his tone steady but tender. "Sometimes, systems that once excluded us will try to make us question whether we belong when they finally open the door. But you don't need to justify your presence here. You've earned your place, and more importantly, your perspective isn't an accessory. It's an asset." Clara sat down with tears in her eyes, and from the back row, someone began to clap. Slowly, the applause spread across the auditorium. That night, back at home, Malik sat at his kitchen table, looking through an old family photo album. There was a picture of him at 8 years old, sitting beside his mother in church, notebook in his lap, taking notes even then, capturing the way the pastor strung words together like poetry. Absorbing every syllable, he smiled. That child still lived in him, the one who had been taught by a mother who never had the chance to finish school, but who knew the value of education, of presence, of speaking truth even when it shook. His phone buzzed, a text from the CEO. Saw Clara's email. She said today changed her life. "We're lucky to have you." Malik didn't respond right away. Instead, he reflected on how far the journey had brought him, from being seen as the angry black man to becoming the steady hand, the mentor, the one people turned to when things felt uncertain. The next day, something remarkable happened. During a firm-wide meeting, the CEO introduced a new internal initiative, the Malik Brand Leadership Fellowship. It was designed to mentor, support, and sponsor rising talent from underrepresented backgrounds into senior roles across all departments. Not just legal. Malik was stunned. He had advocated for change, mentored quietly, spoken up in rooms where it wasn't always easy, but he never imagined they'd name something after him. The CEO looked directly at Malik as he addressed the room. "We've made decisions here that were long overdue, but if we're honest, they wouldn't have happened without the courage, integrity, and consistency of one person who refused to give up on the idea that this firm could be better. Malik, you didn't just rise, you lifted others with you. And that's what leadership really is." The applause that followed wasn't just for a title or a policy. It was for the man who changed the rhythm of the room, who didn't scream to be heard but spoke with such clarity and integrity that silence had no choice but to listen. And from that moment on, no one could mistake Malik's conviction for aggression again, because the truth had been revealed, not just about him, but about a system too long held together by fear of change. Clients began requesting Malik personally, not just for his brilliant legal mind, but for his humanity, for his ability to lead negotiations with empathy and backbone, to find solutions where others found dead ends. One day, after a particularly successful client presentation, Jamal caught up to him in the elevator. You ever think about what might have happened if you had given in and toned it down back then? Jamal asked. Malik chuckled. I think I wouldn't be here, and you probably wouldn't be either. Jamal smiled. Well, thanks for not shrinking. Malik looked at him. Don't you either. Later that month, a black high school student visiting for career day asked Malik a simple but profound question. What do you do when people see you as a threat just for showing up? Malik knelt so they were eye level. You show up anyway, and you stay long enough that the room has no choice but to change shape around you. Malik Grant's story reminds us that change doesn't always come in loud declarations or sweeping movements. Sometimes, it begins with a man walking into a meeting where he knows he's misunderstood. Choosing stillness over rage, truth over ego, and integrity over approval. He was labeled before he ever had a chance to speak, judged for his tone, his presence, his very being, but he didn't bend to fit their expectations. He challenged them to expand their vision. And in doing so, he didn't just become a partner. He became a pathmaker, a voice for those still waiting to be heard, a light for those who've been asked to dim. So, let us ask you, have you ever been misunderstood? Have you ever had to hold your ground in a room that didn't expect you to lead? We'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. If this video moved you, if it reminded you of your worth or someone else's, don't forget to like it. Share it with someone who needs encouragement. And subscribe to our channel for more powerful, true stories from everyday heroes.